Building a family can be a complicated, messy, lonely, and sometimes heartbreaking process. But you don't have to navigate this challenging journey alone.
Welcome to the AllPaths Podcast, where we support and celebrate all of the different ways there are to try to grow your family. We are your hosts, Kate and Emily from the nonprofit organization AllPaths Family Building. And today we're so excited to bring you our 50th episode.
Woo!
We started this show 1 year ago, but actually AllPaths has always been committed to using storytelling as a tool for support and advocacy, and our podcast felt like a natural extension of that work. And it has been truly our honor and privilege to share diverse voices and experiences of our family building community. And we're so grateful to everyone who has shared their family's journey with us. We're also so grateful to everyone who's listening. And we truly hope that this show has been a source of connection, comfort, validation, and hope for you, and that it will continue to be so. So, of course, for our 50th episode, we also have to have a very special guest, and that we do. Today, our guest is our friend and colleague and new AllPaths board member, Elizabeth Carr. Elizabeth, thank you for joining us today.
Hi, ladies. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, thank you so much, and we're so happy to see you. I do feel like pretty much most people listening to this probably do know who you are. But for those that don't, if you could just briefly introduce yourself, and then we're going to talk more about your family's story.
Sure. So I'm Elizabeth, and I am an AllPaths board member, but most people probably know me as the first in vitro baby born in the United States. So that is my fun fact at a dinner party that I am very honored to be able to pull out. And so I was born December 28, 1981. Spoiler alert, IVF is not that old. And I'm going to say that until I'm like 102, I've decided.
Seriously. Yes.
So that's my claim to fame.
And you were born in Virginia, but you are a New Englander, right?
I am Massachusetts through and through, but I was born in Virginia because actually IVF was illegal. It's hard for people to wrap their heads around that, but IVF was illegal in Massachusetts at the time. Actually, the DA of Suffolk County called IVF experimentation on human cells. There's like an old newspaper clipping I'll have to dig out. And so the IVF program was only in Norfolk, Virginia. And so my parents had to travel back and forth from Massachusetts to Virginia in order to access care, which is slightly wild. And then when the doctors said, well, we could, make arrangements so that your daughter could be born in Massachusetts, my parents politely said, no way. We want Virginia to have, the kudos because you all in Virginia made it possible. But then, I've grown up in Massachusetts, and Massachusetts, of course, became the first state or one of the first states to have comprehensive insurance coverage in 1987. So I get the best of both worlds, really.
Yes, that's so true. I'm glad Massachusetts at least then got better in that respect. But it also, to me, made so much sense that your parents wanted you to be born in Virginia because you all created such a bond between your medical team and your family, and I know it's one that lasted a long time, which is so amazing.
Yeah, for sure.
And continues to now. Yeah.
It does. Yeah. When I fast forward, when I was having my son, one of my doctors was calling me on the phone and regularly asking me, now, not that you'll have complications, but just in case you do, where are you planning on delivering? And, do they have XYZ facilities? And, this kind of thing. Because, in his mind, I was still his patient in his mind. Yeah.
So yeah, one of your IVF doctors was doing that.
Yes.
Yeah, or your parents
Or your
IVF
parents,
doctor.
yeah.
Yeah, your
That's
parents'
cool.
IVF doctor was still feeling invested in your child. Yeah, that is amazing.
It's like his little grand patient or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I know some of the exciting parts happened before you were born, but can you share your family's journey to you?
Yeah. You know, it's weird. My parents met and fell in love at the University of Maine, where my mother actually, her infertility issues started there in the days that physical education was still required at the university level, just to set some context. So she was in a still required gym class and she was having some abdomen pain. And the gym teacher said, well, you can go see the nurse, but not until after you run one more lap. And, you know, because the gym teacher thought my mother was just trying to get out of running, which, you know, if you met my mother, maybe not so far off, but anyway, so she ended up not even being able to complete the lap because she just doubled over in pain. And she went to see the school nurse and her appendix had ruptured and just burst. So fast forward, she had her appendix removed and, you know, they thought all of that was taken care of. Fast forward again, my parents are now married. They're trying to start their family and she gets pregnant, but she has an ectopic pregnancy. The doctor figures out that the reason, and often we don't know the reason, right, with ectopic pregnancies, but in her case, they figured out the reason was because of scar tissue from the surgery to take care of her ruptured appendix. There was actually a lot of scar tissue that was causing complications. So, you know, they said, well, you can try again. We're not sure that it's going to happen again. It could have been a fluke. So they try again. Lo and behold, she gets pregnant. Unfortunately, she has a second ectopic pregnancy. And at this point, one of her fallopian tubes ruptures and blows up. And so that caused major internal bleeding, lots of horrible stuff there. And, you know, my parents are tough cookies. So they try one more time. And on the third ectopic pregnancy, my dad found my mom in their bed, just white as a sheet. And she had lost so much blood. When they brought her to the hospital, the doctor said, you know, if you had gotten here 5 minutes later, your wife would be dead.
Oh my gosh.
And so they removed, you know, her last fallopian tube, basically. And her OBGYN said, well, now, Judy, you realize that without fallopian tubes, this means you'll probably never have a child of your own. But, you know, go home, recover. I'll follow back up with you and check in a couple weeks. So in a couple weeks, they go back and he says, you know, you're recovering nicely. And he says, but, you know, I wanted to talk to you and see what you were thinking about in terms of, you know, wanting to build your family. Because my parents both came from big families. She was one of 3 and he was one of 4. They always wanted a big family. And he said, I'm just an OBGYN, but I just came back from this conference where I heard about this thing called IVF. And there was a team in England that had success in 78. And there's now a group down in Virginia trying to start a program. And they're looking for patients. And I think you'd be a good candidate. And I would be willing to write you a letter of recommendation. I think you should apply. And he gave her like a 1-page flyer that was just black and white and had like 5 sentences about IVF. And my parents took it home and applied. And about a week later, Dr. Howard and Georgiana called my parents and said, how soon can you come down here? And that's all my parents knew about IVF.
Wow.
That's incredible.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know I speak for Emily. I don't often do this, but I know I can speak for her in this respect where we get very emotional thinking about your mom, Judith, and your late dad, Roger,
Yep.
their bravery, their kindness, like everything has just been so profound because, and I always picture that like mimeographed brochure that they took this chance on something that looks like it was
Did not look legit.
copied and
Yes.
folded in the library or something.
Yeah.
But it's just amazing. And we've been so honored to meet your mom and obviously to get to know you very well. And it's moving to us every time we see her because, and we love, of course, to see you too. But as IVF mothers, quote unquote, I feel like we feel a forever bond with her too.
Yeah.
It's so special. So they were just so brave. They took a chance on this mimeographed brochure, this kind of crazy sounding concept.
I know.
And then the ball started rolling. So obviously they were successful. And I think I've never asked you this or never heard about this, but was her pregnancy smooth?
Yeah. So, people always ask the typical questions like, how many cycles did she go through? And I always have to kind of level set, like, remember, this was the 80s. And Louise Brown, who was the first IVF baby in the world, was a natural cycle. So there were no hormone protocols involved, which, everybody nowadays is pretty familiar with. You have the hormone shots. That all was invented with me. That was figured out on my protocol. That basically was my mother's protocol. So it was smooth in the sense that, like, she didn't have morning sickness, and like I was very small, so she didn't have like, a lot of discomfort, things like that. But it wasn't smooth in the sense that, like, she was one of the first women in the world to be on a special medicine called Pergonal, which many people now know as Menopur, which was being flown in from Switzerland. And if you missed the window and timing for that and didn't get it just right, it was a very costly mistake. And they were also flying from Massachusetts to Virginia. There was no injecting yourself or having your spouse inject the hormones. So every blood draw, every shot, they were seeing a doctor or a nurse for. So that aspect of it was not necessarily smooth. It was quite the undertaking. And because it was the first time they were doing a hormone protocol, they only retrieved 2 eggs from my mother. Like, people don't realize that, they weren't getting, even to my mother, like when people say, oh, we only got 5 eggs, they'll share their stories. My mom's like, wow, that's a lot. To my mom, that sounds like a ton, because they only got 2 from her and they only transferred 1. And here I am, right? So, it was smooth in the sense that, like, I was an easy pregnancy, but everything else about it was not easy.
And I know the media coverage around the pregnancy and birth was quite a bit. I wouldn't describe that whole experience as easy for your parents either. I'd imagine.
Yeah. So the fun fact is that the embryo was transferred on my mother's birthday. And so they came in singing happy birthday and right after the transfer, and brought a little cupcake and said, make a wish. And it was kind of like, well, we all know what you wish for, right? And when they found out that, yes, she was indeed pregnant, it was announced in the press, but their name hadn't been released yet, because the Doctors Jones called my parents and said, well, you do know that you're our first success. And it hadn't occurred to my parents that there had not yet been a success, because they saw all these other couples walking around also trying IVF, even though they weren't allowed to talk to each other because they all had different protocols and they weren't allowed to compare notes. But they just assumed, like, some of these people might be pregnant. because we're all trying to get pregnant. We're all trying to go through IVF. So they didn't realize that they were the first until the Dr. Jones said, by the way, you're the first. And my mom was like, oh. And then they said, well, you have the option to keep your name out of the press. If you would like to do that, we will protect you and we will make sure nobody knows who you are ever. And my parents didn't even hesitate and said, absolutely not. If this pregnancy goes to term, we want people to know that this option is available and that, we're just like everybody else and that this baby is healthy and normal and, that this is available. Because if our OBGYN had not told us about this, we would not be pregnant right now. And to this day, like that has been their mission, right? Like we always did educational things when I was growing up, and it was always important. And I think that's why I've been so open, sharing their story and, even growing up, my story was because I feel very strongly, like, I don't care how many times I have to tell the story. If it helps just one person know about this option, then it's worth it. It's worth the lack of privacy. It's worth, boring myself with the same story over and over again. It's worth it. It's worth it.
Yeah. So. Well, we love you for that too, because, obviously your parents actively made that decision, which we, again, appreciate. But I feel like you kind of were thrown into this and it was, but I think it speaks to, the way your family celebrated and controlled their own narrative made you view it as something that could be celebrated and told and shared as well, which in general, we really believe in. What is your earliest memory of, like, how did you hear your own story the first time? Do you remember, like, or maybe not your very first, but like, how did it come to you? Because now in retrospect, you look back and like the Life magazine cover is like, quote, like you laugh, like that's my baby announcement or my baby book is Life magazine. Yeah. So you see that in retrospect, but obviously at that age you weren't aware. But do you remember kind of when you became aware of it?
Yeah. I mean, my mom always says that I started asking the normal questions when I was like, probably 3 of like, where do babies come from? And she always just told me like, well, we needed the help of doctors and science to have you, which is a little bit different than from maybe how your friends were born. And that was like, okay, cool. Like, you don't know that that's a different definition than, your next door neighbor might have gotten, because you're not in their house, you're in your house. Mm-hmm. But I definitely realized that the way I was born, like, people made a big deal out of it. And I wasn't quite sure why, because in my every day to day, it wasn't a big deal. But I think it finally dawned on me when I always say, I think I was like 6 or 7, and we had gone back for one of the Mother's Day reunions at the Jones Institute clinic. And at that point, there were like maybe 10 babies and, or maybe like 100. I don't know. It was like either 10 or 100. It was a small enough group. And they were screening the Nova documentary of my birth, because on top of everything else, there was a documentary crew in the delivery room with my parents when I was being born. And Dr. Howard Jones was on one side, and Dr. Georgiana Jones was on the other. They were the 2 people who started the clinic and were my parents' doctors. And so they were effectively giving me running commentary during the documentary of my own birth, trying to like dumb the science down to a 6-year-old level so that I could understand what was happening and like why this mattered. And so I think when you watch yourself on television, like in my mind, I was watching myself on television as a 6-year-old. I was like, okay, this is a big, like, my parents worked really hard to have me, and like, there's all these scientists and they were trying to figure it out before I was born, and they didn't figure it out until I was born. And, I think that's when the light bulb kind of went off. And then I appreciated it a lot more.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, I love your story about how at those reunions, you guys were given these necklaces and that yours had, you can share what did yours have and what did the other kids have?
Well, first of all, Dr. Georgiana told Dr. Howard that she had this vision for one of the reunions that all of the children were like angels. And so for one of the reunions, as a surprise to his wife, because he was very sentimental, he pulled off this surprise. And so we all went marching by Dr. Georgiana wearing like pipe cleaner halos.
That's very cute.
And as a thank you gift for us, like marching by her, we all got either a bracelet for the boys or a necklace for the girls. And on one side of the necklace said our initials. So on one side, it says EJC. And on the other side, it had our number. So only the first 10 have this. So it goes up 1 through 10. So my number, of course, was 1. And as we got older, we started to, instead of using each other's names, the first 10, we would always call each other by our numbers. And that was kind of like our little wink to each other of like, we don't need to talk about how we were conceived, but it's like our little nudge to each other of like, hey, we're in this club together. That's really special.
I love that. I love that.
Cool. Are you still in touch with 2 through 10?
I know. What's up, 7?
Yeah. Number 10 actually went to Harvard when I was at Simmons. So he was right down the road. And he was in one of the what are they, some fancy name of the acapella group there. I forget what it was. And I was in the Simmons Sirens. So that was kind of funny, which is their acapella group. And number 5 is down in Virginia Beach, and I'm still in touch with her. There's some ones in the middle that I've lost touch with. But yeah, we actually, a bunch of us have a group chat, and people think it's funny because on my phone, I call it Petri dish posse. That's a group chat.
Oh my God. Yes.
I love it.
Yes.
Much better than test tube babies.
I know.
No, way better.
Yeah. That is awesome. I love that. And I feel like if you saw number 7 tomorrow, you have a bond for sure.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
It's so cool. It's so cool.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, to me, again, it's just so wonderful how you have embraced, I'm not saying every day of every moment of your life, but I will, embraced is not too strong a word, but because you have truly embraced it, but you have accepted, let's say, this role, even though you didn't ask for it. And I mean, in my opinion, above and beyond what would have been asked of you. And so I would love to hear, I think you shared a little bit about it just now, which was so lovely, just about obviously how connected to your parents' journey you feel, that they worked this hard to have you and had to go through all of this. But also, like, I know it's more than that as well. So I'd love to hear in your words, like, why you are so active in this community, and particularly obviously around advocacy. I feel like your voice is so important. It's so powerful. It's so needed. And I feel like you've done this. You've accepted your role as an advocate for a long time, but it has taken on, this could be my impression, so correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like it has taken on a strength and an urgency that it didn't have before since the Alabama court decision. Yes. So that was a long question / comments, but I'd love to hear your take on all this.
Yeah. I mean, I think I'll answer your question by backing way up. Yes, I did not always embrace this. I will say that there were several years when I was in college that I just wanted to like disappear into the woodwork, and just like be a ghost essentially. And I think one of those times was I was in the Star Market right by Fenway Park, because I went to college in the Fenway area. And I didn't want to eat dinner in the dining hall. So my roommate and I went to Star Market to grocery shop. And we're in the checkout line, and she's looking through a tabloid, and I'm in the tabloid. And it's comparing myself and Louise Brown.
No.
And like how we were paid for, and how our weights and heights and all this. And I'm like, I wasn't interviewed for this. This is such an invasion of privacy. And my roommate is like, oh my God, this is so cool. And I was like, don't you dare buy that. I was so mad. I was like, don't you dare. Like, this is awful. Like, this is gross. And she was like, no, I'm totally buying it. And I was like, so offended. And she was like, no, I'm going to buy it and you're going to sign it for me. And I was like, no. And I didn't speak to her for like the rest of the night because I was so mad. And I was like, this is what nobody sees and nobody understands. This is why I would just want to like disappear into the woodwork sometimes, because, nobody talked to me for this story. Nobody understands what this feels like except for me and maybe Louise. So there's that part of it. But the other part of it is like, I just think of all the kids that were born via IVF in particular that have come after me. And particularly the attack, I'll say, because I think it's an attack on, IVF as a family building tool, because in my mind, it is a tool. It was a tool that my parents needed in particular. It wasn't my mother's fault that her scar tissue got in the way of her fertility. It wasn't a moral failing on her part. It was like a breakdown of her body.
Can we blame it on the gym teacher?
Right, I know. And so she needed this tool. And so I just think of all the people who need this tool, the LGBTQ community, the people who have some genetic disease that they didn't ask for, the people who didn't ask for cancer that want to preserve their fertility. They need this tool. And, I want those kids to exist. And when all the Alabama stuff started, and they were classifying embryos as people and all this stuff, all I could think about was, oh my God, am I going to be the last first? Like, am I going to be the last first IVF baby, or the last, I don't know. Like, I know the first frozen embryo transfer baby, Zoe in Australia. I know all these, cool firsts. And I just kept thinking, are there not going to be any more firsts in this field? And I used this line, I don't want to become an endangered species, because that's very much what I felt like. And I felt like, you know what? I have to use my voice as loudly as I can. And I've grown up under this media scrutiny. So you know what? I've developed a tough skin, and by golly, I grew up in Massachusetts. So come at me, bro. I'm Boston tough. Like, okay. So I used every tool in my toolbox. I was a writer. I was a journalist. And so I, used my voice as loud as I could to say, hey, this is not okay. And it got people to perk up and pay attention. To the tune of, I ended up being invited to the State of the Union. And, it helped rally the troops, and we, got a Band-Aid put on Alabama. Is it perfect? Are we there yet to, completely remedy that situation? No, but, we were able to at least restart IVF in Alabama. So, I've decided that people who are actively going through and building their family, if I can take up some of that slack and be the loud voice for them, then I'm going to do it, because their singular focus and, job is to take care of themselves, because they're trying to build their family. So I'm going to fight, because they need to fight for themselves and take care of themselves and try and focus on building their family. So they need to do that. I'm going to do the thing that I can do and just be loud and fight because I can do it.
Well, we love you for it, truly. And I think that's so important what you said. And it's also, I'm really glad you mentioned that obviously at times this kind of curiosity into your life and your health and everything has been challenging. I know, but I feel like your voice, your powerful voice for advocacy takes that curiosity and makes it a powerful thing. It's like, okay, and I think what it seems, again, not to put words in your mouth, but like that example of when you were in that tabloid, I think probably felt so disempowering because you weren't part of it at all. Your own voice wasn't shared at all. It was so creepily done, it sounds like, too. But then it's like on the positive side, you can get media coverage in a way that like an individual IVF mom or dad or patient can't get because of that curiosity and interest in being the first. And so the fact that you have leveraged that into something so powerful is really so appreciated. And we were cheering so hard when you and others connected to IVF were at that State of the Union, which was amazing. And so we just really appreciate you using your voice in this way. And your professional life has intersected with the fertility field as well, including in your current role, which has been really cool too. You want to talk about that?
Yeah. So I have been for the last, I guess we'll call it 3 years now. I'm rounding up by like a couple months. I have been a patient advocate and in PR and marketing for a genetic testing company called Genomic Prediction. So they do pre-implantation genetic testing. So for people who are going through IVF and want to screen for some of those terrible genetic diseases that they maybe want to try and mitigate, being passed down through their family tree. That's the kind of stuff we do, which I just think is fascinating. And, was definitely not possible when my parents were having me. So I think that's also why I'm drawn to it. I think that's another thing that like this field has just been, so rapidly, in one way, rapidly advancing on the technical end, and on the other end, like, insurance coverage and these kinds of things. It feels like in some ways we're kind of stuck in this loop where we haven't progressed as much as I wish we had, and we're kind of like catch up to the technology, right? So yeah, it's a really lovely thing. And my favorite part of the job is when I get to answer patient calls and emails, and just to let them know, like, I get it. I of all people, I get how waiting can be really hard, and just like all the steps in the process of IVF in general, and then adding in like a testing process, and just like where you are overall. I love being able to talk to people and just, hear their stories. And sometimes it's not even like, where are we in the process? It's just that, I just want to talk to somebody because I'm feeling lost. And those are the conversations that like I really value the most. So it's really fun. It's a really fun part of the job that I just really love. So that's the fun stuff.
And other fun roles, or I'm hoping you're going to say it's a fun role that you've taken on recently as a new board member for us.
Yes. So that's the other thing. Trying to figure out how to give back to this field is something I think you both have probably heard me say a couple times in a couple different forums. And I recently came back I was giving a grand rounds at OU, which was really fun. And they were asking me like, well, why do you even do these talks? And like, why do you do this stuff? And I wasn't kidding when I said, like, truly imagine trying to say thank you to an entire field And when I say field, I don't just mean like doctors and nurses and embryologists. I mean the whole sphere. I mean the organizations like AllPaths. I mean the organizations that do even grants. I mean the people on the ground who are therapists who listen to people. And I mean the people who do the coding at the fertility clinics. I mean the whole sphere, the whole gamut, because every single person in the field touches the people who are building their families. The journey, I mean, it really is one of the only things where every single person has a hand in building that family. And I don't think people outside of this field understand that. And so when you feel like your life is thanks to that, thanks to those people, and thanks to that field, the words thank you seem woefully inadequate. And so serving on a board like AllPaths and, doing these talks and helping educate and using my voice as loud as I can is truly my way of saying thank you. And I try to do it every day because it feels like the most natural way to repay something that I just don't think I can repay in any other way, essentially. There's a scene in the documentary of my birth where at the beginning of the movie, the guy behind the camera asks my dad, like, what do you think you're going to say to Dr. Jones when your daughter is finally born? And my dad just goes, I have no idea what I'm going to say. What can you say? And so then after I'm born, he asks him the same question. And my dad gets really choked up and he says, there are no words. I just had to give him a hug and shake his hand. And that's how I feel about the whole industry and the whole field. Like, that's my hug every day, is giving everything I've got. And my poor husband knows I don't turn it off. Like, this is truly a passion for me. Like, I live, eat, breathe, sleep it.
I know.
It's really important to me.
Yeah. Well, I know to us, you have repaid it like 100 times over, but we're really glad you're not stopping. I feel like you're doing more every day than you were the day before. I mean, at a certain point, I'll help you make sure you don't get too burnt out. And I love your husband and I love your son, so I'm going to make sure you don't get too burnt out.
Yeah.
Because I mean, your debt is paid. But we need you and we appreciate you so much. And like I said, I think your voice, because of who you are, being number one does have a power no matter what. But sometimes I'm really struck by like how fortunate we are as a community that it was you, because you have the skills, and I know they've evolved over time, but you were the right person because you're a natural storyteller. I know you've had so many different interesting professional jobs over the years, but to me, like, and I know I don't know all of them, but from what I recall, like, I feel like the thread throughout all of them has been storytelling.
Yes.
And really using stories to help others and to make change. And we just love, obviously, that aligns with our mission so much. And we're just so glad that it's you. And like I said, we feel such gratitude and affection for your parents too. Forever, forever, forever. And their debt's paid as well.
Yeah. My parents are definitely the OGs when it comes to just taking a leap that, I'm always in awe that they took it, because it was one heck of a leap.
I mean, a huge leap, like mentally, and like I keep saying, and in bravery, but also just logistically living in Massachusetts and having to go to Virginia many, many times, and sometimes for long periods of time, for this experimental thing Well, and I feel like your mom, she still has that like glint in her eye where I'm like, they picked the right girl because
Mhm.
she is fierce.
She's fiery. Yeah, that's where
Yeah.
they get some of it.
Well, and I know you're passionate about really getting other IVF offspring involved in advocacy. And I love that. And I think there's a lot of potential there and that we really need it because, I mean, obviously it's hard to be in this role sometimes and hear the things that people say about IVF because not just as a parent, which is like, come at me, bro, as you said, but also just when we have the privilege of getting to know so many parents and children and now adults that were created in this way and families that were built in this way. It's like, how can you not celebrate this? These are the most
Mhm.
amazing people. And do not tell us you are pro family and be against this incredible science. Yes, we need to be careful. We need to be thoughtful, of course. And we are. The fact that people act like this is like some kind of reckless field just drives me crazy. Is there always room for improvement? Of course. I would never say anything is perfect. But like to demonize an entire field that to me is just incredible is just ridiculous. Uh-oh, here I am going crazy again. But I am
That's
not
why
against.
we need people like you who not only have the skill set but also the
Yes.
heart to sit here and be
Yeah.
like, hey, this is what's actually important that you need to know about this field. Everyone should sit down, shut up, and listen.
That's it. That's
In a
it.
perfect world.
Yeah. Shut up and listen.
Massholes are talking, everyone.
That's right. Yeah, no. And you know, I've started doing this new thing on my Instagram. I don't know if you noticed, but I've started doing what I call stand up in my living room because I get so many questions every day from people that are perfectly reasonable questions, but people are too scared to ask them out loud. And so I've started taking their questions and they're turning them into like little stand up routines that because you know, I'm not going to go do stand up in the real world. I don't have time for that. I do it in my living room. Because I think also like people are so worried about, you know, it is serious and it is important, but also like I fully recognize my life is weird. And it has been weird and that's okay. And some of these things are really funny. You know, so I've started, you know, when people were asking, well, how, when you were little, you know, were you made fun of when your friends found out that you were an IVF baby? And how did you handle that? And, you know, I had this kind of like vivid memory of like, well, how did I handle that? Oh, yeah, I remember like I literally at my lunch table held a press conference. And I wasn't kidding. Like I treated it like a press conference. I sat at the lunch table and was like, what's your question? Okay, no, that's not right. What's your question? Okay, yes, that's sort of right. And I literally took like down the line and
I love it.
It was your destiny in media.
Yeah.
And so I took that memory and I turned it into like a little stand-up routine about, you know, how, you know, this was a weird experience for me too, but it evolved, right? Of like my explanation, even to my friends, kind of evolved from like that third grade press conference where everybody thought I was a refrigerator egg. And it kind of evolved by the end of recess into like, well, not a refrigerator egg quite exactly. And, you know, that it grew as I got older, right? And they started to understand more and more and more. And, you know, that's okay. Like it doesn't have to be perfect. And, you know, that's a totally legitimate thing to worry about. And it doesn't have to be perfect. And I want people to understand that, you know, it's okay to ask these questions too. Like I really want people to feel like they have a friend that they can just call up and have some coffee with and not be afraid to ask me the really ridiculous questions because I've already been asked them all, first of all. And yes, I have a belly button and nothing's going to offend me. And I'm here to help. And so I've started just kind of doing this thing and people are really resonating with it because I'm finding out that more and more people have had the exact same experiences as me. And just in different, maybe it's not about being the first, but maybe they've had the same weird conversations with their friends or with their other family members. And so, I think that's what, to me, like the goal of AllPaths is like, we're here to just help you find the resource and help you have those conversations and just make you feel like I'm going to reach out a hand. And no matter what, if you reach out a hand, we're going to take it. You're always going to have someone take your hand at AllPaths. And my hand is probably going to also have a cup of coffee in it, but that's totally okay. And I think that's just the most important thing to me, is I just want people to understand that we still need to be having these conversations, and we can't let up off the gas.
I love that. And I think you're right. We want to be the safe space where you can ask about belly buttons and you're like, if that's what's worrying you, yeah, let's talk about it. But so aside from saying, yes, IVF babies do have belly buttons, what's one thing that you would say to somebody who's just starting out on this journey?
Oh, I think the biggest piece of advice is probably advice that I got actually from my OBGYN, who was actually my mother's OBGYN, who was the one who told her she would never have children. He became my OBGYN when I was old enough. He always told me, Google never had a baby. And I know that it is very easy to access information on Google, but I think it can get really overwhelming really fast, and you can go down a really wild rabbit hole. And so if you're going to go on Google, then make sure you go to the trusted resources first, and you don't just go to search results. So if you're going to Google, then go to AllPaths and find the resources there. But don't just, Google, because Google never had a baby.
I love that. I know people have found lots of unhinged advice or resources online. So I have to ask, what's the most bizarre thing you've seen about yourself? I'm sure that there have been plenty of stories that have popped up over the years.
Yeah. I mean, I think the weirdest one to me is always just that people legitimately think that I grew in a tube because of the test tube moniker. And this is what I'll say about that. I met the guy who came up with the test tube slang, and he just came up with it. Like, it is literally just a slang term, has nothing to do with anything. There are no test tubes involved. It just was like something that came in his head. It was catchy. And my joke is always like, if I actually grew in a tube, do you think I'd really be 5 feet tall? Because I would have a lot more headroom. Like I'd be really thin, first of all, and I'd be really tall. But yeah, I think that's the one that always like boggles my mind. Is that, like, I really grew in a tube. It's always that one thing. Yeah, it's the tube thing is like a bit. That's the big thing. I don't know.
No, I agree, and I also really appreciate again how you do use humor very effectively with that. Like, that it wouldn't have been a test tube anyway. It would be a petri dish if you want to be accurate.
Yeah.
And I love how you share that. But also I like how you, which I agree with, have framed it as like, that was an attempt on their part to be provocative and to make it seem like it was creepy and weird and happening in a lab. And it's like, I always picture like those little like those spongy toy kind of things where like you get them wet
yes,
and then they grow. And I'm like, no, that's not how it is. Like, it's
dinosaur sponge, you get an Elizabeth sponge. Like,
exactly.
No, that's not how it works.
Exactly. So I agree with you. That term is inaccurate and rude, and it's time. I feel like it's going the way of the dodo bird, so that's good.
But people still use it.
I know. It's so annoying.
Well,
but
if
hopefully
the guy who pulled it out of nowhere hasn't apologized yet, I hope he does soon.
Yeah. I mean, there's a reason the group chat is Petri dish posse, not test tube something.
Right.
I can't think of an
Exactly.
alliteration, but test tube is not in the name of the group chat. Thank
No,
you.
it's not. Nope. Nope. Yeah. It's yeah, that's the one thing I'm always that it will follow me forever, I think.
So now I know you haven't gone through this process yourself, but as you know, the person that you are, being so entrenched in this space and being such a voice for patients, how would you recommend someone show up for a friend or a family member who might be going through IVF? What have you seen that other people have done, or what have you found that has been really helpful to support the people in your lives who are going through fertility treatment?
Yeah, so I think one of the best things that you can do is ask one question, which is, do you want resources or do you want an ear? Because I have had a lot of people in my life come to me in particular because they know who I am and I clearly know a lot of things and a lot of people and a lot of resources. And so I always start there. And people have told me that that is the single most helpful question that I have said to them, because often, they don't want suggestions, they don't want resources, they don't want those things. They have their plan, they have their people, they have their clinic, and what they want is either an ear to listen to them, that is a safe space, that is judgment free, that will say, I am here for you, I am standing next to you, you can lean on me and I will listen to you, I will be your sounding board. Or it's the opposite, and it's somebody who is unclear about the decisions that they're making. And you don't even necessarily have to give your opinion or any 2 cents, but even just sharing, here are some helpful resources that may help you make your decisions, and different options you might want to look at. Just even asking that question has been really helpful. And then I think that the final thing is, I tend to ask for forgiveness and send things without being asked to send things. So I tend to like to send people that I know are actively going through family building just a box of things for themselves. So like a box of tea and a nice mug and maybe some slippers and a blanket or a nice book, just to say like, hey, I know you're going through these things and I see you, and I want you to have these things to make you feel good. And don't expect a call or a thank you or a phone or text or anything, but just to say like, I see you. But I think if you want to actively be there for your friend, to ask that question, do you want an ear or do you want resources?
I love that.
The most helpful thing you can do. Yeah.
Amazing.
I love that. Emily, remind me, what is Jennifer's that she says?
Do you want to be helped, heard, or hugged?
I love that.
I love both. Both of those are just so awesome. And even you're sending something to someone without asking to is like all of that. I feel like puts the person in the driver's seat. You're there for them, but they are in charge of what they want. And then, I mean, I do think that also lessens the stress for the supporting person, because then you have a better sense of what they need from you. It just makes for a more effective relationship. It's genius.
Yeah.
I just need to remember it more often. Well, I just go straight for the hug, and I need to ask permission for that too.
You give a good hug, though. But also, Elizabeth, I feel like you're that person for so many people right now.
Yeah.
There are so many people who, because of everything that's going on in the world right now, might not even feel comfortable sharing with their friends and family members that this is what they're going through. But then you're out there, this public face who is standing up for everyone and being that friend that even if they never talk with you, that they know is out there fighting for them, so that if they're not ready to say anything yet, somebody is fighting. So thank you.
That's something I am so honored and humbled to be able to do. I mean, I set aside an hour every night which is not enough time, but it's what I can give, from my website and from my Instagram, which are the two primary ways for people to get in contact with me. I don't have a team. I don't have staff, but people email me and message me all hours of the day and night. And I answer every single question and every single message, because I feel like it's important. And so many people do feel like they can reach out to me. And I love that. And so I want to be able to help people. So if you haven't gotten a message from me yet, you will. I just, I have a backlog. I only have an hour a night. But, that's the kind of thing that, I do ask that question. And so if you get a response from me, that's probably the first response you'll get from me. And it matters. You want to know how you can show up for people, because words matter, and words can be just as stressful as the process itself, truthfully.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. Well, for your sake, I'm glad you put boundaries around it at least a little bit.
We will put those links in the show notes,
Yes.
but that's good that people know going in that you will respond. It just might take a little while if they do reach out.
Yeah.
So is there anything else that you would want to share either about your current work, or your story, or stories that you heard from your own parents about their whole journey that we haven't asked about yet?
No, I think the biggest thing I want to share with people is just, if you're not comfortable sharing your story, I think this is the biggest thing. People are always saying to me oh, we're so appreciative of you sharing your parents' story and even your story and how you feel about all these things, but I can't do that. I don't want to do that. You don't have to.
I totally agree.
It's totally okay to not share your story. The reason I do is because I want to, and I know it can be helpful, but it's okay if you don't share your story. And there's value in that too. And, you can show up for people in other ways, and you can show up for people. You can participate by donating to groups like AllPaths. You can participate by, sharing links with friends or other things like that. You don't have to share your story if you're not comfortable. There's zero pressure. I think that's the one thing about this community, is that everybody has a place here, and you can show up in whatever way makes you comfortable in this community, and nobody's going to judge you. And I think that's the most wonderful and lovely thing. So just because we're all comfortable saying our stories doesn't mean you have to be, and there's zero expectation or zero pressure to do so. So I guess that's always kind of my parting, wisdom is it's totally okay to not share your story. You can protect your own peace if that is what you need.
I love that. Well, thank you. It's always lovely to chat with you, but thank you so much for being our 50th guest.
Woo-hoo! We need some confetti.
Yeah, it's always lovely to talk with you, but thank you for being you, for being that person who was just, random stroke of luck, happened to be number one, and has continued to kind of be number one for all infertility patients from there on out. We love you.
Well said.
Really appreciate you.
Thanks, ladies.
Yeah, thank you.
We hope you'll join us next time for more family building stories and resources. Be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts to make sure you never miss an episode. And follow us on social media at AllPaths FB, or visit our website, allpathsfb.org, for more information about our work.
We're so excited for this year's Footsteps for Family Building Walk, happening this Sunday on October 5th. This event is so much more than just a walk. It's a celebration of the many different paths that a family building journey can take. Today, we want to give a very special shout out to our presenting sponsor, EMD Serono. Thank you for helping to make sure that no one who struggles with building their family has to walk alone. You can donate to or join the EMD Serono walk team today using the link in the show notes, and we cannot wait to walk with you on Sunday.
Thank you for joining us for this episode. Please help spread the word so that anyone who is struggling to grow their family can join the conversation. It's an honor to walk with you on your family building journey.